welcome to another episode of Because I Have Thoughts. I'm Dr. T, and today we're going to continue the conversation on identity. Last episode, we talked about how our identities are impacted by pop culture, social media, and some of the antiquated views of the Bible. Today, we're going to further the conversation by talking about children and how their identities are formed. I actually have a special guest with us today, Jennifer Edwards. I actually met Jennifer when I was working for Church Communications, and she was a part of the She Leads Church project that they do annually. This is a conference that they do where women get together and share a message on a specific topic designed by She Leads Church. And sometimes they create breakout groups after the conference, and Jen was one of the leaders of the breakout groups. I actually had to monitor and moderate her breakout group, and I got to actually participate. So I've totally asked Jen to join us today and give her perspective on how the conversation of identity impacts our children. Jen is a mother, a wife, and a ministry leader. She's actually married to her high school sweetheart, and they've been married for 24 years. She has 3 growing boys, 21, 18, and yes, an 8-year-old. She has experience being a biological mom, a foster mom, an adoptive mom, a working mom, and a stay-at-home mom. So she's got a lot of the mom categories covered. Jen has over 20 years of experience in advocating and serving kids and families in her local church community. With over a decade in full-time ministry, Jen uses her education in family ministry and early childhood development to coach other ministers, write curriculum, publish articles, and speak to parents and church leaders. So let's welcome Jen to the Because I Have Thoughts podcast family and hear her thoughts on the conversation of identity as it applies to children. Well, everybody, this is Jen. Say hi to Jen.
Hi, guys.
So glad for you to join us today, Jen. Jen and I met, I don't know, how many years has it been?
I think at least 2.
At least 2 years. Yeah. Lots of life has happened since we.
Yeah.
And as I said in the intro, Jen and I actually had the pleasure of moderating and monitoring her virtual small group through She Leads Church. And I also got to participate. I actually found your group to be very fun. You're quite hilarious.
Well, I definitely try, but let's not give them high hopes today.
So we're going to continue the conversation on identity. And because you've done so much work, decades, I think, right?
Yeah.
Of work with children and in the area of early childhood and working with families in ministry, I just wanted you to come on so we could continue the conversation on identity and how it applies to our children. I'm a mom. I know you're a mom. Maybe we'll dive in there and talk about our own personal journeys with our children and then go from there. Sound good?
Sounds great.
Okay. Well, I have a 27-year-old son. Oh my God, I sound so old.
When you say it out loud, right?
Right. You're right. And you have 3 boys and their ages are?
8, 18, and 21.
Oh my gosh.
I know. Big gap there. Everything
Yes.
changed. Everything changed.
Yes. And when you think about their different personalities, like how different are they? Are they similar?
So it was primarily my oldest 2 for the first, big, long time, decade of parenting. And we joke like they're cut from the same cloth, but they're so very different. And I noticed kind of at an early age, toddlerhood, when they would even do things differently, when they would find their way around toys differently, when they would be gravitated towards different activities and different likes and shows and things that would capture their attention. And then with my third, it's pretty funny because he's got so many great qualities of each of the older siblings, and then he's got his own. So, we know, and we talk about and probably can read a million books about like birth order and, how that affects things, or even like, if you're sick as a child, or if you have an easy childhood, or if you're a child from trauma. But what I think is great is that God knows all of that. and he has built every child with just this natural bend to be exactly who they're supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I truly believe that there are qualities that we're born with and qualities that we developed based on our environment.
Yeah, for sure.
I was having a conversation with my niece the other day about, certain cultures, they look for those early signs to identify their kids' job or career path or passions and things like that. And I was very intentional with doing that with my son. He's an artist. And I was telling her, like, every Christmas and every summer camp program or extracurricular activity, I just really try to nurture him being an artist.
Right.
Because he just seemed like he gravitated towards that. Like when he was maybe 2 or 3 years old, he was always drawing and coloring. Like those were the things that he was drawn to. So I was like, okay, he's going to be an artist. I need to nurture that. So I truly believe that when kids are born, when we're all born, that we're born with certain qualities, certain distinctive identifiers that are specifically to us.
Right. Yeah, I think we can even look to the scriptures for that. So in Proverbs 22, it says, train up a child in the way he should go. It's not like all of them are going to go down this one path, right? So they're individual pathways.
Yeah.
And, even when thinking as our children are older, if they are part of the body of Christ, and we talked about this when we were talking, you don't want 22 arms, right? So just as the body of Christ functions its best with differences, so does within our families, within our children, within classrooms. Pathways are meant and built for them specifically, for their natural tendencies that God's built in them, like you said. And then also their role in the body of Christ is going to be individual as well.
Yeah. I love that you quoted that scripture because so many people take it out of context and they just apply it to spiritual growth or faith. It's a faith-based reference, but I'm like, no, in everything, in every aspect of life. Like for me, the Bible is a holistic tool,
right,
that we apply to everything, not just how we walk with our faith.
Right. Well, and if we think about that, it says, and when he is old, so he's on the path for a long time, right? It's not like we're just putting him on the path and then like, okay, you've done that. I kind of joke like my kids can try anything and, but they're not quitting everything because I've already paid for it, right? If I've paid for the registration, like they're gonna stay on that path and they can quit it after T-ball is over. Yeah, they can come off the path. But I think what God is talking about is not just those individual, the scriptures are referencing that path of life and that long journey. And I think that's the journey of becoming the person and the self and the body of, the piece of the body of Christ that God's intended for all of us to become.
Yeah, because we're all part of a bigger plan that.
Exactly.
And I sometimes I'm like, there is an individualized plan, but that individualized plan is connected to a greiter plan.
Right.
I don't think people get that picture.
So you told me to dig in a little bit to, it was Dr. Eric Mason, I think, right? And I did. And my favorite thing that he said was that we all have a purpose. Our purpose is the same, right? To love God and love others. Right. And I think we can kind of figure out how that looks and how we work that out in our own way. Right. But that's our purpose.
Yeah.
But our assignments are different. So we're a part of this bigger situation, this bigger piece, this bigger body of Christ. But our assignment within that can be very different.
Yeah.
And I think that's great to remember for children.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Indeed. Yeah, Dr. Eric Mason, he is a wonder.
I was just that one episode that I, went into, I was like, you couldn't get enough. There was so much, like I could have filled like pages, right? Of notes and thinking through what does that look like? And of course I always see things through the lens of early childhood and family and mentorship and stuff like that. And I think it all applies. It all applies to the picture of, what we want when we start down the path of raising children.
Yeah. What
Yeah.
I'm most intrigued about his conversation about our purpose is the identity disorder and his perspective on it. And how he just talks about it's a broader scope than just sexuality, which is usually what that label is about, and how the conversation usually goes is about gender and sexuality. But I like that he talks about that it's a broader conversation, that there is an identity crisis in so many different areas, especially with people of faith, but even in our ethnicity, even in our culture, even in our religious practices. And I'm just curious to know your thoughts on how that will impact children, how that's impacting children.
Yeah.
What do you think some of the major indicators are or influences are with regards to identity in children?
So I think when I look at that, I just have a pretty simplistic view of, I'm thinking of children and where we are in our current situation. And if we look at kids, I mean, even my 8-year-old, overstimulated, overbooked, overscheduled. And the thing that I think that we're missing, and the thing that I think that would be so great for us to be able to capture, is that moment for them to connect and to figure out their true self, the self that God created them to be. So I'm talking about like when we were kids, right? We just went outside.
Yeah.
Right? We didn't have like a bunch of like interesting things to do. You just went outside, or you were bored sometimes, and that was okay. But what boredom brings, and I looked it up because I thought, I'm looking at boredom so small. There's just one or two things that I'm thinking of. But let me tell you what this does. Boredom helps children develop self-control, self-awareness, creativity, social skills, academic skills. So think about that. If we give a child downtime at a very young age, you'll see, what are they gravitating towards?
Yeah.
Are they going towards books? Are they going to draw like your son wanted to do? Are they going to, want to play music or listen to music? Mm-hmm. There are things that are built into our children. And I just wonder, are we doing a disservice by not allowing them to find those and then for us to nurture them at a very young age?
Yeah. I think so many things are involved with that. I think parents are overbooked and busy.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Always looking for somewhere to take their kid, which, me, I was guilty of that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
I remember one summer, my son was enrolled in 3 different camps. He went to NASA Space Camp. He went to, it was like this artist-driven camp where you got to pick your direction of art or your focus, and then you just did that for the 8 weeks. And then he was also in an academic, like boys-related, empowering small boys camp, all at the same time. So like that summer, I spent more time in my car than anywhere.
Oh, yes, yes. But if you look at it, though, you gave him a variety of things to do, right? You weren't picking a path for him. You weren't saying, this is the individual that you are, and this is how you identify with the world, or this is how you're going to connect with the world. I mean, you gave him science and social and art. And so I think that's if there's a takeaway, so if boredom, working mom, we know this. If we can't always build in boredom, but when we look at things from a holistic approach, like summer or like a break in school, maybe don't just put them in sports.
Yeah.
Maybe broaden that horizon a little bit. And, I think we can also pray about that. Yeah. And ask God, like, what should I do? Instead of just, going, okay, we're going to pick random things that the community is offering, really look at your kiddo, talk to them if they're, of age where they can express to you. And really, even if it's something that you've never considered for them, maybe think, okay, he would like to do art. That's what we're going to try, and kind of, ask the Lord too, to help you find that pathway for your kiddo.
Yeah. Yeah. You said a key thing, which is communication. Communication is key.
Yeah.
I think that Well, I will say that we are communicating more now with our children than at the time that you and I grew up in.
Yes, for sure. And I think the millennials are doing an even better job. I
Yeah.
mean, they're the parents today, I have an 8-year-old, but most of the parents with my same age child are younger than me. And they're doing a great job.
Yeah.
They're communicating, they really do want input from the kid. They're doing a lot of softer parenting than what we probably did,
I
or
don't
for
know how I
sure,
feel about all of the soft parenting, but
for sure what our parents did. um, but I think, sometimes it's easy for us to be like, oh my goodness, we see those reels or whatever where someone's making fun of that mom going, now, honey. But what I think we can take away from that is we're going to have a generation of kids that are coming through with great levels of empathy, and they're
yeah.
going to be great listeners. And every generation does things different, right? So I did not parent my kids the way my parents parented us, not 100%. Some of it was great. And so every generation is going to be different. But if we just lean into what their strengths are going to be in that generation, and in that next generation, be like, okay, so we've had a lot of gentle parenting, and maybe that hasn't been 100% great, but what it's going to do is bring a lot of children to the front as empathetic listeners and feelers. And I mean, that can't be wrong.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
So I think that helps too.
I agree. I mean, I am not a proponent for corporal punishment. I just don't believe in it.
Yeah.
But I do think that there are some areas where we've overcorrected with some of the soft parenting.
Yeah.
As we talked about in our prep conversation with regards to like social media and pop culture and having our kids exposed to a lot of those things, like little Johnny does not need a cell phone at 8. He just don't. Like, who's he calling?
Right. Well, and I think parents understand they don't need it.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a need base. What I think it is an influence.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times, well, I know I definitely did this. I was guilt ridden, right? So if I worked, I missed out on things. If I didn't work, I wasn't contributing. There was a lot of things, and no one was saying this to me. It was all inside of me, right? So we know that's it's the enemy trying to, destroy us, bring us down, make us question our parenting. And so that's the old tools. He's using the same tools. He's just using different means to do them. And I think social media is definitely one of them.
Yeah.
And, you're right. They don't need it. I can't think of a kindergartner little girl who needs a Stanley Cup, but she's got them, right? And she's got them. She does have them. First graders wearing Birkenstocks. They don't need it. They don't have to have it, but it is definitely an influence. And I think it's a trickle down the funnel effect. So mom is influenced, and then the kids get the influence, and it continues to go. And I do think it is definitely an influence from social media.
Yeah. I remember when my son was in high school, he did have a cell phone, but originally he just had like a pay-as-you-go phone. And his 16th birthday was coming up, and me and my husband were like, we're going to get him. This will be his first smartphone, his first iPhone. And that's when he got his first iPhone, but he still was not allowed to have any social media. I just feel like adults have a hard time processing everything that's on social media.
Oh, for sure.
So why would we expose our kids if we can't handle it as adults?
It's the truth. And I'll give you, this will be a moment of honesty for everyone listening. I have a thing where like my Instagram tells me when I've reached 45 minutes. I don't know why I chose 45 minutes, but it says like, you have reached your limit. Well, there's an option to say like, extend by 5 minutes, ignore my limit. Literally every day I ignore my limit. I hit the button, ignore limit. And so it's like, okay, if I know that this is a pull for me and I'm 44, and my frontal lobe is fully developed. What are we thinking is going to happen when we allow? And I'm speaking to the choir because my youngest, he's 8. He could probably work an iPhone better than both of us.
Oh yeah.
But I just wonder, and I'm not saying technology is bad. My kids are all on it. I'm not saying that, the time they've spent on it is all a waste. It's not. There's a lot of really great stuff out there.
Mhm.
My niece is so smart with so many things because she watches YouTube and TikTok and all the things, right?
Mhm.
But I just think the messages that we as parents portray even
Yeah.
about our scrolling or what we see or the latest fads or the latest things that we need, it cannot just fall on deaf ears. It's falling on our children's ears.
Yeah.
And so them on social media or them on technology mixed with or added to what they hear and see from us and our practices, I think that's where we have a bit of a problem.
True. Very true. Very true. I don't know. I do have one of those. I'm like you. I do have the indicator on my phone to let me know how long I've been using my phone. On my phone, period. And then it gives you the breakdown of like, you were on this app for an hour, you were on
I
this.
am not looking at that. Oh, no, 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 no. You take it a step further.
I'm trying, Jen. I'm trying so hard.
No. Listen, I know about me and I do not want to see that.
But I feel like it would be a good tool if people are using it for their kids because social media has a huge influence. And I do agree that kids take more from from their parents from what they see than what we say.
Right.
Which is one of the reasons why I do monitor my phone usage because I have my little nieces that come over, and
Right.
when I'm spending quality time with them, I don't want them to be like, well, auntie's always on the phone or auntie's always in front of the
Right.
TV. Like, we go outside. Girl, I played hopscotch one time. I don't know what I was thinking. My body was like, stop it.
But see, isn't that great? You are giving them screen-free enjoyment.
I must have lost my mind that day.
That is so funny. Yeah, I think labeling anything inherently bad, right? That's where and I was raised fairly strict. We talked about a little bit of my background and so there were some things that were just kind of off limits. You know what you want to do when something's labeled bad or off limits, right? You want to go there. If there's a closet door that says do not open, like I want to open it. So I think, just labeling anything inherently bad, or I mean, unless it's unsafe. But, this is where that communication part can really come into play. This is where, having real open, understanding conversations come into play because you don't want your child to get their identity off a screen. You
Yeah.
don't want that. I got a Stanley. I'm not knocking that, but that's not, that's not just going to, there's a balance. There has to be a balance.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I do also think that, and I mentioned this earlier, that kids will sometimes make decisions for themselves separate from what we do, think and feel and how we live.
Yeah.
Because my son is a minimalist. He would never, ever ask for a Stanley Cup. And I am the parent that is like, don't you want a Stanley Cup? They're so
Right.
They're so nice.
Cute.
And he's like, Mom, what do I need that for? He literally still has, I think when, I don't know, one of the Marvel movies came out, he's a huge anime head. So one of the Marvel movies came out and he got the the cup for that. He's still using that.
I think that's great.
He's completely opposite for me. So I do feel like that there are just parts of our kids' identity that is just innate to them.
Yeah. So I think it was in the text that you sent me. Priscilla Schreier says that when we are functioning in the way that the manufacturer intended,
yes,
right? That just stuck out to me because it's not when we're all functioning in the same way. Mm-hmm. Right. And I think we have a tendency, especially if you look at, like the educational system and those things, there's a lot of oh, we all walk in this line, we all do this thing. But in our homes, what we can control, we just need our kids to function in the way the manufacturer, God, intended them to.
Yeah.
So you can be a minimalist. That's fine. You can, I mean, I have one kid, I can't see the top of his dresser, right? He's got stuff, and that's fine too.
Yeah.
But then when we look at these things, these differences, especially if it's differences from us, instead of looking at them as, oh, he's not like me, look at it and go, okay, God, how is this going to benefit him or her and her life on the path? A minimalist would make a really great missionary. My kid with all the things is he holds treasures. So it's like, well, how is this going to benefit these children? How is this going to benefit them in the long run? Why are they doing it? And it's not to be different from us. It's really, it's because it's their natural way of doing things.
I don't know that I've ever had that thought. I've like completely just had an epiphany with you talking. Like, I don't know that I've ever had the thought of how will my son's minimalistic personality help him. I know how it's blessed me. Like, I feel complete conviction sometimes. And I'm like, you know what? I don't need that. My son is so right. I don't need it.
Yeah, I think, if you think about a child, even little children, I used to have like the one that when we were ready to go out the door, he would gather all the things, right? Like all the things. And it would be like, oh, I've got a basket of goodies that I'm taking in the car with me on every occasion. And then I have one that would take the one special. What does that say? Like everything our kiddos do, we really can kind of look at it through a lens of, okay, this is going to teach me something about them now.
Yeah.
Right? This is going to teach me something that's going to help me see the bigger picture of the individual that my child was created to be.
Yeah. Indeed. I'm enjoying this conversation, learning so much. I'm glad that you brought up the quote from Priscilla Shirer. And when I read that, I'm still reading that book. I think I have like 100 more pages to go. It's such a great book. I'll put it in the comments.
Yes, you recommended it to me. And just the snippet that you sent me, I was like, oh my word. Yeah, so good.
It's her newest book. It's called, I have the title in front of me. Do you have it in front of you?
I had it right here too.
Oh, it's called I Surrender All. And
I know I put that in my notes.
Yeah, and she wrote it in relation to the movie that just came out, The Forge. I don't know if you've seen that movie.
I have not.
It's on Prime now. I'm getting ready to watch it in the comfort of my home with all of my good snacks. But anyway.
No better way to do that, that's for sure.
Right, but you're right. She did talk about how the importance of operating in how the manufacturer made us.
Yeah.
What do you think is the greatest outside influence that maybe has a child operate differently than how they were made?
So I think what we can sometimes, well, let me share what I think helps a child.
Okay.
And then we'll go from there. I think the one thing that I can look back at my parenting or other people who have parented well and have made kind of like a well-rounded, great, like, oh, that's an adult and yay, they're doing great things in society, was that they didn't do it alone.
Yeah.
And I think, we talked about this, even me and you, used to be a community feel to parenting. And somewhere, and I know that COVID, affected a lot of that, that parenting became very isolated. Some groups of parents feel isolated just because of the nature of their parenting, like special needs.
Yeah.
Sometimes foster and adoptive parents can feel very isolated. There's things we cannot talk about. And I say we because that's part of my story. So I think parenting in isolation really is what's going to hinder your child from developing into that individual person that God has created them to be. And the reason why I say that is because they may only have one or two people to pull from.
Yeah.
If we widen our circle and they have coaches, they have maybe extended family, which I think adds a great deal to our children's lives. Maybe a small group leader at church. all these people, if we are strategic and make sure that it is, people that look different from us, have different experiences than us, different ages than us, and all those influences come into your kiddo, then what that's going to do is she's going to be able to grab little things from each of them that helps build who they're supposed to be.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be the one that's going to teach my sons how to play football.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'm just not, right? But I'm also not going to be the one that teaches my sons how to paint.
Yeah.
So, like you said, you used camps. That's a great example. Church is a great way to do it. School, tutors, coaches. You've got to widen the circle. And, we had a circle, and it was, it used to be that if you, and we talked about this old school stuff, right? That if you acted up, anybody could get you, right? And they could get you and tell your mama and take you back to your mom. And like, that doesn't happen now. But what I love is that me and my husband built a circle for our boys. And it was the type of circle that I knew that if my boys were ever in a place where they got themselves and they didn't feel comfortable calling me or their dad, that they could call one of those people.
Yeah.
Because errors and missteps and mistakes come with finding who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we look at the little people at 2 and 3, we can't see that sometimes.
Yeah.
But at 16, 17, 18, when they make those errors, those missteps, that maybe they get off the path for a little bit. Mm-hmm. You've got to have a circle wide enough to rally around, not just you, but your kiddo, and say, hey, we're not letting you stay off the path. Yeah. We're going to come together as influences to help you get back on.
Yeah. Agreed. That's so, I was just thinking about all of the times I've had that personally with my own son. And I remember, I think my son was in middle school, and I was teaching a mom's group, because at that time I was a stay-at-home mom, and I was teaching a midday mom's Bible study. And I remember telling one of the moms, I'd rather my son fail within my home. That way we can talk through how he can get back up and how we can correct whatever mistake he made, rather him do it outside of the home. And he has no clue, and he's not equipped. There's something about that parental safety net that helps when your kid is growing and maturing and finding their own identity. And while we are the primary influence, you're right. There's so much importance in having good, substantial, healthy influences outside of the home. Mm-hmm. Yeah. My son, I have a cousin who he actually passed away, but he and I were the same age. And he was such an influence in my son's life. My son still talks about how much he misses him and all of the things that he learned from him. My son would go to church camp in the summertime, and this cousin of mine was one of the counselors. And he always found time to have one-on-ones with my son. He would take my son to Wendy's all the time, and they would have guy days. Yeah. So you're right. There's something to be said about having community influence, right. Good community influence on your kids' identity and how they're growing and how they're nurturing, because it just can't come just from us, just from our
parents. Right. And I would say that's, when we're looking at that, we're not going to do that with possibly a toddler, right? Yeah. But when we're looking at identity and helping a child find their correct path and their passions for life and all of those things, that's when the circle needs to be widened. But I also think there's something we can do for toddlers, for little people. And a lot of times what we'll do is we will neglect spiritual development of a child. Mm-hmm. And we would never neglect social development, physical development, right? We all put our hands up and let them walk when they can't really walk. We talk to them and call them by name, even when they don't know their name yet. I remember talking to my kids all the time, like, okay, today we're going to go get in the minivan. They never spoke back to me, but that didn't stop me from talking to them. But I think a lot of times we can see an easy way when they're older. But what I would challenge, if anyone's listening with smaller kids, younger kids, is we cannot neglect their spiritual development just because they can't output anything spiritual to us. Because they are still made in the image of God. They still are an individual. And that's where it starts. Don't wait to start when they're older.
Yeah.
Because then you've got so much work to do. But if you start some of those, spiritual development and telling that little baby, God made you. And you are so, so, so special just the way you are. Right? That's a spiritual development process that goes inside them. Telling them, Mommy loves you, so does Jesus. That's spiritual development that really builds up that self-esteem. And I know we talk a lot about videos and screens and all of those things, but let me tell you something. If I turn on the TV, any 2-year-old in the room would know if it was Bluey just by listening to it, right? They know what McDonald's is, or in my case, Chick-fil-A. My son loves Chick-fil-A. Just by seeing a sign, they can't read.
Yeah.
But they know when you turn in, right? They're little happy people. I really believe that just as they can hear the Bluey theme song, hear Daniel Tiger, know what their favorite food is, that we can help them learn the voice of God at a young age, just the same. So that when they're older, and it is harder to stay as an individual and to stay on the path and to stay grounded in the things that they know, they'll have an anchor that we placed in them at a very young age that told them that they were loved by God, that they were made for a purpose. Yeah. So that's my whole. Older, widen your circle. Younger, lay your foundation and let it be so strong.
I think that is a fantastic place to stop. I mean, you've given us so many good nuggets. Everybody out there with, I think from small children to adult children, because, as a parent who's on the tail end of that journey, I feel like parenting never really stops. I think the dynamics change.
Yes.
The conversations change. You do things differently. We talked about that, how your kid transitions into a friend that you're kind of counseling now.
Right. And that's when I told you about the story. I always tell my boys, and I think you said this to yours too, I'm not your friend, I'm your mama, right? And then when my kids turned 18, I would always be like, I can be your friend now. And my first boy was like, yeah, hey friend, hey bestie, so sweet about it. My second one, who is he cracks me up all the time. I said, I can be your friend now. You want to be my best friend? And he was like, I'll think about it. I thought, well, I did make you wait 18 years. So I guess that's on me then. I need to ask him today if we're friends.
That's hilarious to me. Like, I got to think about it. I got to meditate on it.
Give me a minute.
Weigh my options.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. I tell my son regularly, I am not your friend. I have no desire to be your friend. I am your mother.
That's right. But we can be friends now.
Yeah, but we're friends now. Like, he'll come in and he'll be like, Mom, oh my God, I saw this TikTok video. Even though on my mind, I'm like, I don't know if I need to see it, but okay.
Right. No, you got to just lean in.
Right.
That's right.
But I think we're friends now. And I hope that's because on my journey, I've done a lot of the things that you've mentioned with regards to helping him solidify his own identity at an early age and just continuing to support him in that and finding his own way. I think one of the things we can definitely take away as parents is trust your child's intuition, their innate identity.
Yeah.
And nurture that. Don't think about who you want them to be, but think who God created them to be.
Right.
I think that was a really good nugget that you gave us, including community as they get older. I think that's a fantastic nugget. You're right. There's so much isolation now. There's so many people parenting alone, especially single parents.
Yep.
We need to engage, find a church, find a rec center, find a camp, and build community. I mean, the camps that he went to in the summer, he still has one of his closest friends is from that camp. They don't
Yeah.
even live in the same state, but they talk to one another regularly. They visit each other. So I think it's important, like you said, to include community when your kid is figuring out their own identity and establishing their own identity. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Jen. This has been a great conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. I've so enjoyed watching your episodes and learning about what you are digging into. And you've already given me another, Dr. Eric Mason to follow and another book to read. So by Priscilla Shirer. So I've really enjoyed it. It has been very beneficial for me in my individual path and journey today. So
thank you everyone for tuning in. Such a great conversation with Jen. She gave us two great takeaways. One being that when your children are at the toddler stage, that is a great time to lay the foundation for that, their identity, lean into their innate identity, preferences and passions and how they're developing. And then as they get older, having a community that can contribute to supporting that foundation that you've laid. Thank you, Jen Edwards, for coming on and sharing your thoughts on identity as it applies to our children and giving us such great takeaways. I hope you all enjoyed this conversation. I hope that you got some good thoughts and takeaways about how you can nurture your children's identity and grow and have good influences and good impact on your children's identity and nurture their innate identity. Please, please, please continue to follow, subscribe. I'm Dr. T, and this has been another episode of Because I Have Thoughts.